Hey everyone, it's great to be with you today. My name is Gena Thomas. I am an author and a writer, a speaker. I also work full-time at a nonprofit in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And today I wanted to share a bit about this new project that I have going on as a way of responding to the coronavirus. Prior to doing that, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a mom of two kids, one 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they are currently in the next room over, and it's possible that they will interrupt and become a part of this video as well. And I've been married to my husband Andrew for over a decade. We were missionaries in northern Mexico for about 4.5 years, and then moved back to the States, and we've been back in the States now for a good while. But we have a coffee shop that we started down there that works with climbers and international rock climbers that come from all over the world, and also with the local church to help support an educational system that the church puts on. There's a middle school there that we are excited is going to open very, very soon. It's been 10 years in the making, and we're so pumped about that opportunity to come up. I also just wanted to mention one of my books, Separated by the Border. You might have heard of this. Border Perspective did a podcast with me on it. Thank you, Jonathan. And that is a true story of my former foster daughter, Julia, and her mother, Lupe, and how they were separated at the border probably late October of 2018. Let's see if I get this right, these dates. And then reunited, that was 2017, and then reunited about 8 months later in 2018 back in Honduras. And I got to go, my husband Andrew and I got to go with Julia back to Honduras and visit her mom and her brothers there. And so that is a story certainly for our time right now. And it's actually one that's kind of helping me get through right now, to be very honest, because it really taught me quite a bit about lament and how important it is to lament major injustices that are happening around the world, just trauma that happens to different people and different systems. Right now, I want to talk a little bit about Elisa and the coronavirus, which is my newest book. It's a children's book. This is my first take at a children's book. And it really was written out of conversations that I had with my kids. In a lot of ways, my daughter, who's 4, and I have had a lot of conversations about coronavirus. And if you're a parent, you're probably feeling me right now. And so this really is just a book that I hope can become a resource for people who, especially for parents who are trying to talk to their kids about difficult things. The process of writing a book has actually been very healthy for all of us as a family, because it really gave us more conversation to talk through and to talk about. I don't have an actual physical copy of the book because it's all going to be digital at this point with coronavirus going on. But this is a drawing that I did. This is a crayon drawing that I did. My daughter and I sat down for a couple hours and just did a bunch of drawings about the story in the book. And so that's the cover of it. But basically, the reason that the book came about was because there's just been a lot of feelings that have been going on now that we're all at home all the time. And for a 4-year-old, it's really hard to process all those feelings. I mean, even for a 36-year-old, it's hard to process those feelings. But this particular book, I'm hoping, is a way to get us as parents to talk more to our kids and allow kids an outlet to speak to those feelings and to give name and place to those feelings. And so we're talking about changes of normalcy. We're talking about racism. We're talking about feelings of anger and frustration. There's a lot of crying for no reason that happens right now. And we're kind of talking through, like, why does this stuff happen? And how are we able to kind of allow ourselves to feel these things? And then I also talk in the book about how different people react differently to the changes. So there's one part in the book where the little girl, who is based on my daughter, is, responding in a certain way and wants other people to respond that same way, but that's not necessarily the case. And so trying to give space for all of us who are living under one roof now pretty much 24/7 to understand that we're all processing this differently. The idea behind this is really just to promote conversation. One of the other things that I have going on with it is a drawing challenge. And so after each page of the book, and there's about 20 pages in the book, there's a drawing challenge for every child to do. If they want to on their own or privately, they can, or if they want to do that online, they can also do that online as well. And so, for example, this is a drawing that my daughter did of a map of the world. This is her version of the map of the world. And this is mine. And so in the book, you'll see my drawings. And then at the end of that page, I ask the children to do a drawing challenge. And so for that page, they're talking a map of the world. And the reason that we have a map of the world in there is because we talk about, okay, this is, this coronavirus is happening here in the United States, but it's also happening all over the world. So do you know any friends that live in other countries, and do you know what they're going through and how this is affecting their life and their regular routine, and what does that look like? And I think this is important for right now. I've heard a lot of parents and friends who are just struggling to have those conversations with their children and struggling to understand their children. And to be honest, I'm struggling to understand mine. And so the hope is that this will be a book that can really get us all to be discussing this more, because for me personally, with so much going on, I've still got work. I now have to homeschool. Got to cook all the time. Like there's all these things. And so life is actually more busy in some ways than it has been in a long time. And so there's a moment kind of at the end of the day where all I want to do is just like zone out and like not think about anything. And that actually happened last night. And I was like, I don't want to talk about anything. But then my daughter came over and was crying again, about not being able to see her grandparents. And so we just sat and talked through what are the things that are making you angry right now about the coronavirus. And what was really neat about that in that moment was we both ended up laughing at the end of it. And really it was probably something I needed even more than she did. So my hope is that this book becomes, like I said, a resource for people to have more discussion. I also hope that with those who are willing to do this drawing challenge and actually submit things online, that we can kind of see each other's artwork, and it can be like a kid's thing where my daughter gets to see, someone else from another country or another region who's drawn a picture about the same thing, and we can kind of like talk through this and just feel a little bit more united in this time where internet seems to be the only thing that kind of keeps us together right now. Another drawing that we did that I want to share with you guys was we talked about what does the coronavirus look like. And in the book, we talk a little bit about germs and how they're kind of invisible. And my daughter said that she thought the coronavirus looked like a worm, and that this is the worm suit that she explained the word worm had. And so this is my drawing of it, because I told her that to me it looks like a gray tennis ball with red clovers all around it. And to her, she said it looks like a worm with a suit on. So those are some of the things and some of the topics that the book goes through and discusses. I hope that other people will consider buying the book for that reason. At this point in time, it's only available on my website, genathomas.com. It's Gena Thomas.com. And it is currently being translated into Spanish. And someone is also going to be translating it into Portuguese. And so, again, the hope is that this can be a global discussion starting in families, because family strengthening is very important to me, and I hope that this will be something that works towards that end. It is $3 on the website right now. The PDF, $3. That's it. And then we'll see if we can get it in Amazon. I'm not sure right now because of different specifics on who can talk on coronavirus through Amazon's website. So I wanted to encourage other leaders who are currently working in immigrant and refugee work in their own communities. There's a couple of things that I wanted to say. First of all, I wanted to suggest, and I think a lot of people are already doing this, but just to suggest, and this is something that's helped me out a lot, is to draw boundary lines for our sanity. I'm in my mind a lot, pretty much always, and always have been. And so trying to find certain ways to just cut out excess of noise that's kind of just going on all the time. And so turning off notifications, silencing group chats, because there's a lot of those lately. Taking a day a week where I don't get on social media, that's been really helpful for me. It's also very challenging at times because, again, it does feel like the way to connect with others right now is through that. But I know that that's not always the most helpful thing to do. And so also just finding a daily rhythm, that's kind of been a challenge for us because we've had a job loss in our own family. And so, just trying to figure out like what's going to work and how can we make this work out. And then, and now my husband has a job again. And so we're trying to get into a new routine of life. And so just going day by day and trying to, build in those rhythms and those routines that can kind of help us, especially as a family and especially with kids, to keep moving forward. And then just limiting my intake of times I catch up on the news because, again, things are just moving quickly in some ways and so slow in other ways. And just trying really hard to like build actual lines in my own life around when I receive information and when I just take a break from receiving it, because again, there's just so much happening at the same time. And it all seems to be happening through technology, right? Through our phones and through social media and all that kind of stuff. And so just really trying to find time to just have solitude and not have to process what else is going on. One of the other things that I wanted to suggest is to acknowledge that there are levels of suffering. And acknowledging those levels doesn't necessarily mean that we are undergoing comparative suffering. I often hear quite a bit lately about people telling us not to compare our sufferings to other people, but to feel our own sufferings, to feel, the loss and the grief and the frustrations. And I think that's really important to do. But I also think there's a privilege there that we have to watch and we have to pay attention to. And I believe that if we acknowledge that there are levels of suffering, then we can still make space to feel what we feel, but also acknowledge that there are others who are feeling a lot more deeply and who are struggling a lot more because of this pandemic. And coming out of that, I think just recognizing that there are things that we collectively need to lament and that there are things that we need to individually feel. And so I've recently written an article where I talk about how I just fall apart making my coffee one morning. And I'm sure as others who are watching this probably feel as well, there are moments in time where we just completely just fall apart. And sometimes I don't know exactly why or what's triggered it. It's just all of a sudden I'll just start crying. And I think it's very important to let myself do that. I'm typically the kind of person who doesn't like to show emotion and doesn't really like to do that. And so making sure that I let myself do that. And I'm realizing that with my son as well, that it's something that we need to allow ourselves to do, and to recognize that there is an underlying reason why we're falling apart. But in that moment, to not stop ourselves by saying, oh, well, this person is suffering way worse, so I shouldn't be crying about my coffee. So again, I think there's just an actual need for us to recognize and to decipher what needs to collectively be lamented and what needs to individually be felt. I pray the Lord is with you and that you feel his presence and his spirit upon you. And I pray that as we continue throughout this, that we can look to the God of abundance and not be undertaken by the idol of the God of scarcity who tells us that there's not enough. I pray that the God of abundance will guide us and remind us that there is enough, that God is enough, and we can be good neighbors during this time. Thank you all.